So I was watching the X Zone TV channel last night when I was abducted by aliens, and they kept repeating to me over and over again, simultv.com, simultv.com.
What's simultv.com?
That's what I asked them. They had it written on the side of their UFO.
How do you spell that?
UFO.
No, I mean simultv.com.
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 Right. simultv.com.
Interesting that you were abducted by aliens in a simultv.com UFO last night.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Now that you mention it, I remember now last night I was awakened from a deep sleep. My great-grandmother was standing there. She said she'd come from the hereafter to tell me about simultv.com. She even spelled it out for me. simultv.com, sonny boy.
simultv.com.
simultv.com, sonny boy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Guys, you'll never guess what my psychic guru just told me.
simultv.com.
Exactly. Are you guys psychic too?
Of course.
We all know about simultv.com. simultv.com.
The X Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X Zone Radio Show or endorsed in any manner by Rob McConnell, rel-mar McConnell Media Company, the X Zone Broadcast Network, its affiliated networks, stations, employees, or advertisers.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome back to the X Zone, everyone. I am Rob McConnell, and for the next 4 hours, I'm your host and your guide as together we cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And the X Zone comes to you Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. Eastern until 2 a.m. Eastern, right here on the X Zone Broadcast Network, Talkstar Radio Network, Mutual Broadcast Network, iHeartRadio, Simul Radio, and Simul TV. If you'd like to see the broadcast schedule that we have for you 24/7, 365 on the X Zone Broadcast Network, visit www.xzbn.net. And for the X Zone TV channel, which is channel number 21 on Simul TV, www.simultv.com. Exonation, my guest this hour is Mark Carlotto. He is an aerospace engineer with over 30 years of experience in satellite imaging, remote sensing, signal and image processing, pattern recognition, and app development. Mark received his PhD in electrical engineering from Carnegie Mellon University in 1989. It has been published over 100 technical articles and written 6 books. Now, in his latest book, in Before Atlantis, Mark draws from his unique background and experience to propose new answers to the basic questions concerning human origins, ancient technology, and archaeological enigmas. His website is beforeatlantis.com. And Mark, welcome back to the X Zone. It has been way too long.
Hello, Rob. Thanks for having me.
A lot of people, and I'd like to ask you this, it's totally off base of what we were going to talk about tonight and what we are going to talk about tonight. There seems to be a renewed interest in the hollow earth theory. And as somebody who works in the aerospace engineering, talking about imaging, remote sensing, and so on, what is your take on the hollow earth theory or the hollow earth project or however you want to call it?
Oh, boy. Well, I mean, I've heard of it,
Yeah.
but, honestly, it's actually almost sort of in contrast to what we'll be talking about tonight, because in a sense, what, we're talking about tonight is the idea of a pole shift of the surface of the Earth the crust sliding over the mantle. And so it's got to slide over something, substantial and molten and hot. So I don't know where the hollow earth would fit into that.
Well, why I asked you, Mark, because I did go over the information that we're going to be talking about tonight. And a number of the proponents claim that there is a hole in the North Pole and a hole at the South Pole that allows, in Antarctica itself, that allows people access to the inner Earth. And I thought maybe you might have a theory on that, but you know what? I respect your honesty.
Well, I try to stick to what I know.
Sure. And I appreciate that. I really do. You were involved in the Mars investigation going back into the 1980s, 1990s. What have you been doing since then, Mark?
I did that for about 20 years, and I kind of burned out. I felt there wasn't much more to do, and it actually, as that was winding down, I moved to a place called Gloucester, Massachusetts, and I got involved in some projects related to local history and archaeology. And so I kind of got out from behind a computer and got my hiking boots on and spent a lot of time in the woods exploring, and been doing that for about 10, 15 years or so.
Well, it's nice having you back. And how did you get involved with your new project and book Before Atlantis?
Well, it was total serendipity. I was on Google Earth looking at some archaeological sites in Mexico that I wanted to visit. We're going to a wedding there, and I thought I'd take a trip off, escape for a day or two and visit some of these sites. And so I'm looking at these sites, and Google Earth is an incredible tool, and I didn't have it back in the days of the Mars investigation. We did all the mapping and all the geographical coordinates. So that was all done by hand. But now you can do incredible things. And I noticed that some of these sites were not aligned to north. And I remembered back in the Mars investigation days that I was looking at some structures on Mars that were not aligned to north. And the theory, a colleague by the name of Tom Van Flandert had suggested the idea that perhaps on Mars these structures were once aligned to the North Pole, but then the pole had shifted, and so are now rotated. And so, my mind back then was on Mars, but we were looking at terrestrial comparisons, terrestrial analogs, and I remember looking at Teotihuacan in Mexico, and noticing it was misaligned. So, fast forward now, this past year, I'm looking at the same images, but now on Google Earth, and realizing, wow, these are misaligned. So, one thing led to another. I remembered Hapgood's theory of pole shifts, and actually some work done by some Canadians by the name of Rose and Rand Flem-Ath. You probably had them on your show.
Many years ago.
Yeah, and they wrote a book called When the Sky Fell, and it was a theory is that Antarctica was Atlantis, that landmass was at a much more temperate climate or latitude and a more temperate climate. And when the pole shifted, they believed that this happened 12 to 18,000 years ago, that it slid down to the South Pole, and that civilization was flash frozen, and it's buried under all the ice down there. Anyway, so all of these things are connected. So all this is going through my mind, and I realized, wow, here's a site that I never really looked at to determine, did this actually, in fact, line up to one of these old poles? And then I found other sites that were misaligned. And over the period of a few weeks, I analyzed hundreds of sites and discovered that magically, or for some reason, they all seem to line up to 4 previous locations of the North Pole. So it was sort of, that eureka moment.
Yeah. One of the most talked about ancient locations where people still say that is still totally aligned is the Great Pyramid in Egypt. Has that also shifted, or is it still where it was many years ago, perfectly aligned with Sirius?
Well, some say that it's changing position ever so slightly. There's a really interesting theory. I'm sure you're familiar with it, which is the Giza horizon correlation theory, which is that the pattern of the three pyramids in Giza match the three stars in Orion's belt.
Right.
And there's also a larger context involving the Nile and the Milky Way and Sirius and so forth, and that all these patterns on the ground mirror those in the sky about 10,500 years ago. And so this date is after this last pole shift. So the last pole shift, and what Charles Hapgood had discovered, and we can get maybe into this a little bit later,
sure,
but not to get too far into it right now, but he discovered that there were several positions of the pole that could explain climate change, and that a previous position of the pole in Hudson Bay, north of you, could have been the cause of the Wisconsin glaciation when the giant ice sheet covered Canada and North America, back prior to 12,000 years ago or so. And so when the pole shifted from Hudson Bay to the current North Pole, the glaciers moved north and so forth. And so all this, so the pyramids in Egypt are aligned to the cardinal directions to current north now. So this, by the theory that I'm proposing, these were built after the last pole shift, but something built before the pole shift, say Teotihuacan, that was aligned to a pole in Hudson Bay. So when that was built, that was pointed north, say 20,000 to 50,000 years ago. And then when the pole shifted back 10 to 18,000 years ago, that shifted position in latitude and also rotated. Because when the poles shift, it's kind of like the crust moves over the mantle of the Earth. It's kind of like a wheel. And so some points shift laterally. Others, if you're at the axle of that rotation, they just kind of rotate. But, Teotihuacan both shifted and rotated. So after that happened, sometime after that, the Egyptians, by this theory, that I'm proposing, they built the structures in Egypt, and so they are aligned and have remained aligned.
All right, Mark, we've got to take
pole.
a break. Please stand by. Exonation, Dr. Mark Carlotto is our special guest this hour. www.beforeatlantis.com. We'll be back on the other side of this break as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. I'm Rob McConnell. Don't go away. Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, join me, Rob McConnell, as together we'll investigate the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology here on the X Zone Radio TV show on XZBN and the X Zone TV channel on Simul TV. Since 1990, the X Zone Radio TV show has been the place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Together, we'll investigate UFOs, aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, psychic phenomena, lake monsters, conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, the truth embargo, alien abductions, ESP, haunted locations from around the world, and so much more. With over 28 years of broadcasting and more than 4,500 individual guests, the X Zone is truly a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality, as evidenced by the credibility, integrity, and professionalism of the guests that we bring to our international audience. If you have seen a UFO, had a close encounter, seen a ghost, Bigfoot, lake monster, or a story that you would like to share or have investigated, contact me, Rob McConnell, by sending me your email to xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, or you can call toll-free 1-800-610-7035, extension 143, and on Skype, X Zone Radio TV. For more information on the X Zone Radio TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, visit www.xzoneradiotv.com or www.xzonetvchannel.com or simultv.com and xzbn.net. Until next we meet here in the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, always remember, X Zone Nation, Keep your eyes to the sky and your heart in the light. The new nonfiction book, Razor of Madness, is similar to cult movies like Clockwork Orange, Dragon's Tattoo, or The Other Side of Hell. Wayne Morin Jr. and Thomas Lee Howell expose widespread and systematic deficiencies in this thought-provoking tell-all novel. Mind control rages among scholars in law schools. Human rights are ignored while thought reform and mental manipulation are accepted practices used as behavior modification. Dr. Louis Jolyon West comes to mind. Media and public scrutiny shows that United States mental hospitals are in fact destructive murder industries. Razor of Madness expose novel details this epidemic through an in-depth professional and personal investigation. For decades there has been a revolving door policy that still releases killers and pedophiles back into society. The maestro of mind control continues to haunt America to this very day. Razor of Madness is available in paperback or as a downloadable ebook at Amazon.com. Exonation Dr. Mark Carlotto is our special guest this hour. He is the author of Before Atlantis, and his website is beforeatlantis.com. Now, Mark, when we're talking about a polar shift, does this polar shift also affect the electromagnetic field?
Yeah, in a sense, it does. Currently, the with the Earth aligned as it is, the magnetic pole does move slowly. That's the reason why a compass doesn't face geographic north, but the magnetic declination, when you read a compass, has to be taken into account so you can determine true north from the magnetic reading. And this changes over time. And the idea is that when the geographic pole shifts, everything shifts with that. And this is actually relevant because of some work that was done in the 90s where they actually discovered back 500 million years ago that there was an enormous pole shift on the Earth, and that's based on these so-called paleopoles, which are magnetic poles. So the two are kind of linked together.
Now, the polar shifts, the pole shifts that you're talking about, how grave will they be? How significant will they be?
So the pole shift that's pretty well documented and accepted by mainstream scientists and geologists was a rotation of about 90 degrees of the planet. Wow. So so the Earth turning a quarter of the way around. These pole shifts are that Hapgood detailed are smaller, say roughly half or a third of that. And they're movements of the pole from its current position to places like the Bering Sea, north of the Aleutian Islands, or to northern Greenland, or the Norway Sea, or Hudson Bay. So it's not a significant deviation. But the one possibility is that these pole shifts were not gradual, but were sudden shifts, and the ensuing shock was the mechanism behind the catastrophes and the destruction and the floods that were talked about by Plato and Atlantis, right. Worldwide myths.
How realistic that Atlantis really is Antarctica and in the far south?
I don't, it's possible that there is something under the South Pole in Antarctica. It's likely if that was a temperate landmass that there is something to be found there. Someone when I was working on the book, telling them what I was doing, I told them the title, and they said, you got to ditch the title because that's going to get you into trouble. And I says, well, not really, because I'm not looking for Atlantis per se, but what is talked about in the book and what I discovered was a much broader context. There might have been a place called Atlantis, and it could have been at the South Pole. Right. It could have also been in the Yucatan. That's actually what I'm leaning more towards based on the data in the book. But the point in the book is that it it was a worldwide civilization that existed for hundreds of thousands of years, and Atlantis was a part of that.
So where in history did we go wrong, where we basically restarted our civilization and our societies?
Well, I mean, in a sense, we're always going wrong. I mean, it's human nature. We tend to forget. We want to forget. We tend to marginalize, as particularly things that we don't understand or that are threatening. And Graham Hancock talks about this amnesia that our civilization has. I think it's human nature, and I think it's probably been going on as long as humans or Neanderthals or Denisovans have been in existence. It's probably a trait that we all these species have, and it leads to forgetting our past and then, trying to rediscover it, and that's what this is all about.
What are the results of your new dating? For example, how old, say, is Machu Picchu?
So Machu Picchu would have been aligned to the pole in the Bering Sea, and that could be 80,000 years old or older. That's the oldest. So sites in Peru's Sacred Valley would be among the oldest. But there's also other sites in Europe and northern Africa that are equally old because they too point to that ancient pole.
Are we talking about the Acropolis?
So the Acropolis would have. The Acropolis actually is aligned to the Greenland pole, so that would have been more like 50,000 years ago, that of course raises the question, or some people would say, well, are you saying that the Acropolis itself is 50,000 years old? The basic idea that I'm proposing is that the original site was established at that time, and that over time it was expanded, rebuilt, keeping that orientation. So perhaps the Acropolis, that structure is 50,000 years old, but the Parthenon is more recent. Actually, it was built on an earlier Parthenon. So there's many cases, and I talk about this in the book, of these structures built on top of older structures. Temple of Jupiter at Baalbek in Lebanon is another example. So these exist throughout the world.
How did the ancients know so much without the technology that we have today?
I mean, who knows what they knew?
Exactly. Like how did they know how to align themselves with the poles at the time?
Well, aligning something to north, all that takes is patience and accurate measurements. By measuring, putting a stick on the ground and measuring the position of the sun, and there's methods of intersecting circles. You can get pretty good accuracy. That's how they think the Egyptians did it to the current pole. There's an assumption is that humans haven't changed. That that our hunter-gatherer forefathers were no less intelligent. They didn't have the technology we had, but they were equally intelligent, and they could figure a lot of this stuff out.
Speaking about Egypt, what does your theory tell us about the Sphinx, for example?
Well, the Sphinx is part of the same complex, and back during the my days of the Mars investigation, I spent a little bit of time with Robert Bauval and Robert Schoch and John Anthony West and Graham Hancock, and that was when a lot of these theories were coming out. In particular, West had proposed the idea that the Sphinx was much older, and then Schoch, through his analysis, determined that it likely was based on water erosion. And this theory pushed back the age of the Sphinx from like 31, like something like 3100 BC to perhaps 7000 BC or earlier, which at that time, and by sort of more conventional alternative theories, if I can use that term, is considered old. This non-conventional alternative theory that I'm proposing just simply has that period of time being the latest since the last pole shift, but there are other periods of time that take you back into much more vastly ancient time frames, going back not 1,000 or 10,000 years, but to 100,000 years.
If there was a pole shift tomorrow, how would it affect us in present-day society?
Well, I actually talk about the pattern of pole shifts in the book, and it appears there's a lot more, I think, to be done with this, a lot more analysis. But when the shift occurs, there are places that take they bear the brunt of it. There's the most damage. That's sort of this wheel analogy where there's the greatest amount of lateral shift. There's the most damage there, but other parts of the planet would be less affected. So it's sort of like patterns of destruction. So, I'm not so sure that there was a worldwide flood or worldwide devastation, back 12 to 18,000 years ago. I think it affected some areas more than others. So as a result of that, the planet was not completely destroyed, but it just, there was just more destruction in some areas than others, and some areas more disrupted than others.
Looking in the history as it is written and taught, how different is the history that you believe compared to the history that is written about?
Well, that history is being rewritten now because back about 10 years ago, they discovered this cave in Siberia with this new humanoid species, the Denisovans, and that is completely rewriting the whole book on the origin of man. And what's interesting, it's all genetically, a lot of the research is genetically based, and they're able to pull out all sorts of information. And so, I think where I'm going with this theory is kind of in the same direction that these new discoveries, new avenues that they're beginning to open up. So I think there's a convergence.
All right, stand by, Mark. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Very interesting topic. And X Zone Nation, if you'd like to find out more about our guest this hour, Dr. Mark Carlotto, visit his website, beforeatlantis.com. And Mark and I will be back on the other side of the news as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. My name is Rob McConnell. Don't go away.
They are here, and they've been here for thousands of years, making their presence known in the shadows. They might be seen by a lonely motorist on a deserted road late at night, or by a frightened and confused husband in the bedroom he is sharing with his wife. But who are they? What do they want? Why are they here? Perhaps most concerning, has the government been aware of their presence all along? The new book by Eli Marzulli, UFO Disclosure, the 70-year cover-up exposed, delves into the world of UFOs. Can full disclosure be soon? Order now and receive a free hour and 37-minute DVD on the UFO phenomenon. UFOs are real. Get both the book and the DVD, a $40 value, for only $19.99. To order your book and DVD today, go to lamarzulli.net. That's LAMARZULLI.net.
Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God. And finally, after the worship of many gods, they conceived the belief in one universal God,
the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com.
Let's see, only 14 more days. No, not 14. Can't be 14. Craig, what is it, 20 days before Christmas? Wow, my gosh. This year has gone by so fast. Exonation, our guest this hour is Dr. Mark Carlotto. He is an aerospace engineer with over 30 years of experience in satellite imaging, remote sensing, signal and image processing, pattern recognition, and app development. His website, beforeatlantis.com. Mark, can you tell us more about Machu Picchu? Can you break it down in terms of the alignments you have analyzed so far?
Sure. In fact, there's a lot in the book, and Machu Picchu is one of the sites covered in the book. But beforeatlantis.com has an ongoing blog where I'm posting new research results, and I just posted some new results last week concerning Machu Picchu. The original revelation with Machu Picchu was like Ollantaytambo and Sacsayhuaman and Cuzco. These are all sites that face a pole in the Bering Sea north of the Aleutian Islands, the oldest pole in this chronology that Hapgood developed. And the particular structure at Machu Picchu that aligns to this is called the Temple of the Three Windows. And so the idea is that when the pole was at this location, this particular structure would have been oriented north, south, east, and west, and the three windows would have looked out to the east. Right now, it doesn't. Right now, it looks out in a completely non-solar direction. And what's interesting is that site consists of several parts. The parts that are thought to be the residences face mostly to the east and are thought to have been involved in some kind of solar alignments, at least solar observations. But the older structures, the Temple of the Three Windows and the Intihuatana, this is the so-called hitching post of the sun, these do not align in any way to the current sunrise directions, solstices or anything like that. But back, 80, 90,000 years ago, they would have aligned to east. And the Intihuatana is particularly interesting because it shows evidence of being modified over the course of time as the pole shifted. It turns out that Machu Picchu was in one of those places on the planet that did not suffer serious damage. There are earthquakes there for sure, but it wasn't devastated to the extent that other sites were. And so there's evidence in the analysis I have on the blog that suggests that the Intihuatana was modified. It was initially a solstice marker to register the summer solstice sunrise, the date of the summer solstice. But then after a pole shift occurred, that alignment didn't work anymore, right? It rotated. And so then they repurposed it as an equinox marker by taking – because what happened was at that point the Machu Picchu shifted from where it was to a place almost on the equator. And on the equator, if you have a structure that has a vertical shaft, at noon on the equinox, it casts no shadow. And so I believe this is when it became known as the hitching post of the sun, back, many thousands of years ago. And there's signs that as the pole shifted since then, other modifications were made to it. It's a very complicated object. It's got very strange angles. Mm-hmm. And if you analyze these relative to the pole shift directions, they seem to be correlated. So this is completely new. No one's come up with anything like this before. It's totally out of left field because that's kind of where I live.
Mind you, that is where most of the brilliant discoveries are made. Right?
Well, brilliance and insanity, right? They kind of there's a fine line between the two of them.
All right, point well taken. What do you think the main purpose for these archaeological treasures were?
These are all impressive sites.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
The oldest sites have the largest stones. The stones that we can't figure out how they were quarried, transported, shaped, fitted, erected. It's not just the Sacred Valley in Peru, but the other structures, other enormous structures, are like at Baalbek. These are 1,000+ ton stones that have been partially quarried. There's indications that there's even more stones underground that are buried. These were obviously sites that had important symbolic significance, ceremonial significance. Perhaps look at the grand buildings in our civilization. You look at the obelisk, the Washington Monument.
Yes.
It's an important symbolic structure, subject to certainly a lot of controversy. But if there's an esoteric meaning and all that to it, but certainly symbolizes greatness and power and strength. And so, I think these sites had they were built with the same mentality. They were built by humans, and like I said, I don't think humans have changed. I think we've always been the same. Just the technology has been different.
All right, but if we're looking at these magnificent structures around the world, do we see similarities that would suggest that there was communication over the great and vast distances that these archaeological wonderments are actually found? For example, Peru, the Machu Picchu, to the Great Pyramids, to the Acropolis. There has to be something here that connected all these different locations. Any ideas on what they were? Or what they are, I should say.
Well, yeah, others have noticed similarities in construction techniques, in shapes of some of these monoliths, of like protruding stubs of special cutouts for putting in metallic structures to join them together. It's not the area that I've specifically pursued in before Atlantis, but others have found similarities in construction techniques and materials used. They always tend to, if available, use the hardest, most durable stones. Others have found similarities based on iconography, and that's been probably subject to the greatest amount of criticism. Because you start getting, it starts to become very subjective, and I think what's appealing about the approach I've taken is it's totally based on geometry and math, and so I found these correlations. The correlations exist. Anyone can go to Google Earth and draw lines and show and see that these points converge to these pole locations. That these were points of alignment. And then the fact that they're correlated with these previously identified poles that were derived based on climate change analysis. In other words, Hapgood, believe that this pole in the in Alaska explained the fact that North America was cold, but Europe was warm at the time. So that's I'm trying to I think what I'm trying to say is that the analysis that I've been pursuing is more quantitative. So there's less subjectivity. It's no less valid. I mean, these are all valid ways of analyzing the similarities. And to your point, I agree that there are many similarities between these structures, between structures across the world. And mainstream science has no answer for that, and that's why I think this is a very exciting area, because you see constantly people sharing photos and discoveries on Facebook, and it's like there's just so much excitement. It's really gratifying to be a part of it.
What do we hope to learn from your discoveries, and how will it affect us in the future?
So I think I'm hoping that someone that has the ability and the means might decide to, say, do some deep excavations.
Right.
Because that's, if these sites, if, say, the Parthenon or the Acropolis is 50,000 years old, if you keep digging under, you keep going down, you should find something else. There should be more stuff there. And so that's the only way this hypothesis will get advanced to a theory, is to actually have some independent means of verifying it. So I think, excavations. This actually had started back in the early 1900s. There was a mineralogist by the name of William Niven who did a lot of research in the Valley of Mexico, and he did stratigraphic analysis of hundreds of clay pits, and he came to the conclusion that there was a broad cataclysm that occurred in Mexico tens of thousands of years ago, and this actually correlates to much of what I describe in the book, and it's in the book.
All right, Mark, I hate to do this, buddy, but we've got to take our final break for this hour.
Sure.
Exonation, Dr. Mark Carlotto is our special guest this hour. www.beforeatlantis.com, and Mark and I will be back as we wrap up this hour here in the X Zone from our Broadcast Center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. I'm Rob McConnell. Don't go away.
You have heard of the X Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
They are here, and they've been here for thousands of years, making their presence known in the shadows. They might be seen by a lonely motorist on a deserted road late at night, or by a frightened and confused husband in the bedroom he is sharing with his wife. But who are they? What do they want? Why are they here? Perhaps most concerning, has the government been aware of their presence all along? The new book by L.A. Marzulli, UFO Disclosure, the 70-year cover-up exposed, delves into the world of UFOs. Can full disclosure be soon? Order now and receive a free hour and 37-minute DVD on the UFO phenomenon. UFOs are real. Get both the book and the DVD, a $40 value, for only $19.99. To order your book and DVD today, go to lamarzulli.net. That's LAMARZULLI.net.
So I was watching the X Zone TV channel last night when I was abducted by aliens, and they kept repeating to me over and over again, simultv.com, simultv.com.
What's simultv.com?
That's what I asked them. They had it written on the side of their UFO.
How do you spell that?
UFO.
No, I mean simultv.com.
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 Right. SIMULTV.com.
Interesting that you were abducted by aliens in a simultv.com UFO last night.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Now that you mention it, I remember now last night I was awakened from a deep sleep. My great-grandmother was standing there. She said she'd come from the hereafter to tell me about simultv.com. She even spelled it out for me.
SIMULTV.com, sonny boy.
SIMULTV.com.
SIMULTV.com, sonny boy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Guys, you'll never guess what my psychic guru just told me.
SIMULTV.com.
Exactly. Are you guys psychic too?
Of course.
We all know about simultv.com. SIMULTV.com.
Exonation, my guest this hour is Dr. Mark Carlotto. He is the author of Before Atlantis. His website is beforeatlantis.com, and Before Atlantis is available on Amazon.com. First of all, Mark, thank you so much for joining us. Congratulations on an exciting book with some, this is truly amazing, and it's going to be a lot of food for thought for a lot of people. But do you think there are going to be more sites that are going to be found that will be able to be applied to your hypothesis?
I think so. Actually, I at first I thought I'd finish the book and then do something else, and as it turned, and then someone asked me, well, what are you going to do next? And it's like, well, I'm kind of still working on this. What I've actually discovered over the last few weeks is that there's a very interesting site up in Siberia. Over in Siberia. I guess it's up, it could be over, depending on how you go. That goes back to 700 AD. They think it was constructed. It's called Porbajan. And this is a new site that's not in the book that appears to be aligned to one of the ancient poles. And it's a very mysterious site. There was an intensive Russian-led excavation back about 10 years ago. And they excavated about a third of the site. And they still don't really understand why the site was built. It's in a place it's actually built on a permafrost island in the middle of a shallow lake in southern Siberia. There's no evidence that it was occupied for very long. There's very few artifacts there. And it's misaligned. And so, when I see things that are misaligned, it's like, what could that mean? And it turns out that the only alignment that works is a solstice alignment back when the North Pole was in the Norway Sea. So this would put it, back, many tens of thousands of years, far more ancient than is thought to be. But, again, the idea is that the structures that they are excavating now that date back, they're radiocarbon dated, I think, to 700 AD or CE, are just, the latest structures on this site. And then the site was, my contention is that the site would have been or could have been established, many tens of thousands of years ago. And then over time, other civilizations, co-opted it, built over it, maintaining the site, the alignment, and so forth. There's actually a lot of precedent for this. In a lot of the sites in Mexico that I analyze are such that it's not just an isolated structure that's aligned to one of these poles, but it's the whole pattern of cultivation, all the farmland, everything around it, the roads. They're all pointing in these directions because they're ancient, and people have built, in those directions following, the pre-existing plan. And that's actually an accepted principle in archaeology that civilizations do that. They don't reinvent the wheel. They don't suddenly decide, well, we're going to do something completely different. They kind of, if possible, they go with the flow and they sort of adapt to what's there.
Let me ask you something. With all the archaeological sites that you have investigated on this planet, is there any relation to the archaeological sites and other planets in our solar system?
So, when I was involved with the Mars investigation back in the 80s, the belief was that, those of us that were working the so-called independent Mars investigation, that is the non-NASA scientists, we thought these structures might be, 500,000 years old, something like that. Whereas NASA was saying that they're, hundreds of millions, billions of years old. And, it remains to be seen. In a few years, we'll probably get to Mars, and we'll be able to check out, these structures, the so-called face on Mars,
right,
and the city, and these other structures. There's been numerous structures that have been found. And, there's some evidence that they're artificial. We'll be able to verify that. And then, then you have those dates, which are going to be, probably, they're going to be ancient. They're going to be probably in, millions of years. Mm-hmm. But now we'll be able to say, okay, let's try to connect that up with stuff on Earth that's maybe hundreds of thousands of years. So we're getting a little closer. I'm trying to, in a sense, this research bridges the gap, because right now we just go back, 3000 BC is sort of when the advanced civilizations on Earth got started, and so that's a long. There's not a lot happening according to the current, paradigms before 3000 BC. From the time we were hunter-gatherers, we became farmers around 10,000 BC, and there's a lot of mystery, on how that happened. And so, in pushing back these time frames, we're getting closer, and maybe one day we'll be able to connect it all up. I mean, it is all one equation. I mean, everything's got to add up. That's my belief, my hope.
So tell me, do you miss the aerospace industry?
No. There's so much going on. Today was I took a break and I watched the latest SpaceX launch, and it's just amazing what's going on. So much activity, and so much is happening. It's just not enough time in the day.
At the end of your book, you mentioned, I believe that it's pronounced the Nakal. Who were they? So the Nakal, I think, might have been Denisovans. I have to think before I say it. It's such a hard word for me to say. The Denisovans are this latest discovery in Siberia. They're sort of a parallel lineage with the Neanderthals that sort of split off from the human evolutionary tree back around half a million years ago. And so in the book, I talk about this worldwide civilization, before Atlantis, that existed in all these places. And I use a term that some ethnologists back in the 1800s used, and they called these people the Nakal, or the Mayaks. This was Mayanism was a really bad word to use to call these people Mayanists. They believe these are people like Churchward and Augustus Leplegion and others who they had reputations, but then when they started studying the Mayan runes, they came up with all sorts of interpretations that were just way outside the box. And so they talk about this people called the Nakal. And I think it's possible if these people were not ETs, were not aliens, they were an indigenous civilization that evolved on this planet, they could have been Denisovans. So what's the takeaway from Before Atlantis?
We have a lot of work to do. The takeaway is that the further back in time you go, the more there's a lot more happening than we thought there was, and that's where the real cool discoveries, the paradigm shifting discoveries, are going to be made.
What was the ultimate aha moment that you felt when you were writing Before Atlantis?
So it was back when it occurred to me that these, I was looking at Chichen Itza, and I realized it was lined up to a different place than Teotihuacan, and I realized it was pointing to not exactly, but close to where another one of the haploid poles was. So when I realized that these poles could be used as a new way of dating these sites that archaeologists cannot date. They look at the alignments and they have no really good explanation for why these sites are aligned the way they are. In fact, a lot of the explanations are really convoluted and they make your head hurt. Wow. But by aligning them to these ancient poles, which are not proven, these are hypothetical poles, suddenly like 50 sites in all the sites I looked at in Mexico line up to one of these poles or line up to a site that lines up to a pole. So it turned out to be a very powerful explanation. And in science, when you come up with a simple explanation that's powerful, that's sort of like an epiphany. It's like, oh my God, what's going on here? And that was sort of my eureka moment. And that all that happened it was like the $6 Million Man, where everything kind of slows down.
Oh yeah, and you had that weird music, and away you went.
It was like an infinite amount of time, but I think it really took place in a few seconds that this realization occurred to me, and so yeah, it happened quickly, but there was a lot of work to be done after realizing that.
Well, Mark, we have to say so long for tonight. I want to thank you so much for joining us. Continued success, and keep us in the loop on what's going on. We'd love to have you back on. So let our listeners know where they can find out more about you and where they can get a copy of your book.
Yeah, so if you go to beforeatlantis.com, that's the main website, and it's a blog. I haven't done a blog before. I didn't do blogs didn't exist, I don't think, when I was doing the Mars research. Anyway, it's a great way of updating the research. So I'm posting. I try to post something new every week or two, time permitting. And there's a few posts there. One on Machu Picchu. And,
Mark, I've got about 20 seconds. Tell us where we can get your book.
And then if you go to beforeatlantis.com, there's a link to the book from there. You can get it on Amazon. Thanks,
Mark,
Rob.
Take care of yourself, and to you and yours, the very merriest of Christmases.
And to you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, sir. Exonation Mark Carlotto has been our guest this hour. His website is beforeatlantis.com, and I'll be back on the other side of this break as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. I'm Rob McConnell. Don't go away.
They are here, and they've been here for thousands of years, making their presence known in the shadows. They might be seen by a lonely motorist on a deserted road late at night, or by a frightened and confused husband in the bedroom he is sharing with his wife. But who are they? What do they want? Why are they here? Perhaps most concerning, has the government been aware of their presence all along? The new book by Eli Marzulli, UFO Disclosure, the 70-year cover-up exposed, delves into the world of UFOs. Can full disclosure be soon? Order now and receive a free hour and 37-minute DVD on the UFO phenomenon. UFOs are real. Get both the book and the DVD, a $40 value, for only $19.99. To order your book and DVD today, go to lamarzulli.net. That's LAMARZULLI.net.
If you are looking for a safe, zero-calorie natural option to the harmful artificial sweeteners on the market today, Just Like Sugar is what you're looking for. Just Like Sugar is a wonderful natural alternative for those health-conscious people who choose a calorie-restricted diet with a great, pure, sweet flavor that tastes just like sugar. Just Like Sugar is a great natural option for people suffering from diabetes and may be useful in restricted diet programs where standard sugars are not allowed and does not cause a laxative effect of some other sweeteners. Just Like Sugar comprises a perfect blend of chicory root fiber, natural calcium, natural vitamin C, and Just Like Sugar's sweetness comes from the natural flavors from the peel of the orange. Just Like Sugar is a natural alternative to harmful artificial sweeteners and will change the way that you believe all natural sweetener products taste. Just Like Sugar is available at your local Whole Foods markets, Wild Oats markets, Henry's, Sun Harvest, and many other fine natural food stores in the U.S., Canada, and worldwide.
You have heard of the X Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.